Since dropping, that's what the kids say, don't they, my 16-inch MacBook Pro review, I've had loads of questions from people asking if it's suitable as a general all-rounder business laptop. And that's a really good question because I think this is one of the most expensive buying decisions you could get wrong. Hello and welcome back to Ellis Reviews, and thank you for subscribing if you have, and if you haven't subscribed, the button's just down there. I know I've made a fair few videos about the latest MacBook Pros, but that's kind of partly what this channel's for. Hear me out though. If you've clicked through to watch this video, you're probably thinking about spending an awful lot of money on a new 16-inch MacBook Pro. But unless you've had your hands on a previous generation 16-inch MacBook Pro or the 15-inch version before that, or even the 17-inch version many years ago, this is quite unlike any computer you've probably used. I maintain that it has a very defined audience, but equally, I know why you're interested in it. So, is it suitable as a general work computer? Or do you have to be a music producer or a video editor or a software developer to make the most of this great big laptop? I think there are a few things to think about before you spend your hard-earned money, and also there might be an alternative that you haven't considered. The first thing to think about is power, and trust me, whether you go for the M1 Pro or the M1 Max chip, that computer is going to have far more power than you need. I have the M1 Max version. It's got the 32 cores of graphics, 32 gig of unified memory, and I barely touch the performance it's capable of. And every week I'm editing 4K video. I'm doing quite a lot with it in terms of intensive creative work, but it just never sweats. So if you're considering buying a 16-inch MacBook Pro as a general business computer or just a laptop to use around the home, it's going to be very fast, don't get me wrong, but you're never going to touch the power it's capable of. Now, obviously that's fine if you've got the budget for it. You know, people buy expensive high performance cars and never touch the performance they're capable of, but it's just worth bearing in mind before you start speccing up your 16-inch MacBook Pro. Trust me, the base spec version is the one to go for. It's more than enough power for what you need. The next thing to think about is whether or not you are a mover. And what I mean by that is if you're the sort of person who takes their laptop around to coffee shops and to meetings, basically you're on the move most of the time with your computer. Now, I consider myself to be quite a fit guy, and I find the 16-inch MacBook Pro too big to lug around everywhere. It's pretty heavy whether you're putting it in a rucksack or in a folio briefcase. You know it's there, trust me. And for short trips, no problem at all. This studio is about a mile from my house, so if I'm on the bike or obviously in the car or walking, it's not too bad. But I wouldn't want to be lugging it around all the time. Weirdly, I used to have the Intel 16-inch MacBook Pro, and I did take that everywhere. I think the reason I've got so used to having smaller laptops is thanks to the MacBook Air. That's just the thing that I use and take around everywhere. So if you're used to smaller laptops that you can carry around with you to meetings and to coffee shops and just out and about all the time, bear in mind that the 16-inch is considerably heavier. That said, if it's going to spend most of its time on your desk, then you're never really going to notice that weight. So I've said this before, if you are intending on taking this laptop with you all over the place, go and get one in your hands at an Apple store first and get used to that weight. Just see if it's something that is going to bother you or not. It's also really worth thinking about the size of the screen. Now, the 16-inch screen on this MacBook Pro is beautiful. It's Retina, obviously, it's got P3 color, it's Pro Motion. It's just a lovely screen to work on, and I edit videos on that screen directly all the time. It's fantastic for that. But when I'm doing normal business type work, it's almost too big. It's worth thinking about how much display is too much display, and for most normal business tasks, 13-inch laptops are about the sweet spot. Now, I'm assuming that you're not going to be using this for things like video editing where you do need more screen estate, and if that's the case, again, the 16-inch MacBook Pro might be a little bit too big for you. Now, obviously, it depends what you're going to be doing with the laptop. If you're doing lots of writing and email work and working on websites and things, it's probably going to be a little bit too big. Whereas if you do lots of spreadsheet work, or you like working in split screen where you've got two apps with quite a lot of kind of content-rich information on either side, then okay, that screen estate might be quite useful. So there's nothing wrong with big screens, and if you're the sort of person who just wants a big screen laptop, trust me, you will love the 16-inch MacBook Pro. But they do force several compromises, the biggest of which, if you excuse the pun, is just the size of the device itself. So again, get in front of a 16-inch MacBook Pro and a 14-inch version and just compare the two screen sizes. Now, there is an alternative to the 16-inch MacBook Pro when it comes to business use and general laptop use, and it's not the 14-inch version. It's actually the M1 MacBook Air. The reason I mention this is because for me, if I didn't do video editing, that M1 MacBook Air does everything else I need perfectly. It's such a wonderful size, you can carry it around anywhere, you barely know it's there, and it has the added benefit of having the M1 chip inside. And as I mentioned earlier, the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips offer more power than most people need. The original M1 is still more than capable of doing very complex tasks, but it's just so fantastic within that MacBook Air. It makes it such a capable computer. Now I know that the M1 MacBook Air isn't as shiny, new, and I suppose as aspirational as that 16-inch MacBook Pro, but when you look at what you really need from an all-rounder business laptop, it's absolutely perfect. It has the power, it has the form factor, it's not heavy, it's still got a great screen, and more importantly, it costs a fraction of the price of the 16-inch MacBook Pro. I'll link above to a video that I made recently where I give you some buying advice for the M1 MacBook Air, but I wouldn't discount it. I know you've got your heart set on that 16-inch MacBook Pro, but the worst thing you could do is spend all that money and then regret the decision because it's just too big, too heavy, and just too powerful for what you need. I had a feeling I was going to finish this video talking about the MacBook Air. If you've still got some time and you really are set on the MacBook Pro rather than the MacBook Air, keep watching for a link to a video I made recently where I compare the 14-inch and the 16-inch versions. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.